On the third year of Joel's cheating, the long-lost system appeared again and told me I could go home. During the last 10 days, I no longer argued or fought with him. I let him stay out all night with his lover. I even let him give her the things I cared about. The day I left was my birthday. He barged in with her, knocked over my cake, and pinned me against the window by my throat. He questioned me about why I would harm their child. When did you become this vicious? I laughed, too tired to explain anything anymore. Yes, I'm exactly this vicious. So go live well with her. Then, under his gaze, I turned around and jumped from the 19th floor, ending everything I had in this world. Chapter 1. When the long-lost system reappeared and told me I could go home. I had just finished a fierce argument with Joel. He had just been intimate with his kept mistress, the canary Laura, and returned home. Seeing me lying on the bed, he came over and hugged me from behind. His lips were warm, brushing again and again along my neck. I sat up straight and instinctively slapped him. Joel, you may not think it's filthy, but I do. He froze for a moment, touched his face in self-mockery, then suddenly yanked me up. He pressed me against the sink mirror, one hand gripping my jaw, his eyes poisoned. You're disgusted by me? Jessica, look at yourself. Do you still have even a trace of who you used to be? I looked at myself in the mirror. My hair was a mess, one strap of my sleepwear slipping off my shoulder. Like a madwoman, the once beautiful, lively eyes were no longer bright nor gentle. Fine lines had quietly crept onto my face, the former radiance completely gone. In that instant, Laura's youthful, vibrant face flashed through my mind, those sparkling eyes, burning with desire and ambition, staring at me in provocation. So what, Joel? Is this your reason for cheating? I leaned against the wall with a bitter laugh, my eyes reddening. He approached slowly, his fingertip brushing the corner of my eye. I've said it more than once, I'm just playing. When I get tired of her, I'll come back. Jessica, I've always loved you. Disgusting. Overwhelming disgust. I screamed in pain, grabbed a bottle and smashed it hard against the mirror, shattering it into pieces. Get out of my sight. After he left, I stood barefoot on the cold marble floor, staring at the giant LED billboard outside. Joel had bought a massive modeling advertisement for Laura. I let out a small, mocking laugh. Scenes like this, sharp confrontation, tearing each other apart, had happened countless times over the past year. From heartbreaking agony at the beginning to nothing but numb despair now. I never belonged to this world. 8 years ago, I came here on a mission to save the suffering, paranoid boy, Joel. At that time, his father cheated. The family business went bankrupt. His mother committed suicide, and he was drowning in debt. His eyes were dead. I came into this world and walked toward that pitiful, desperate boy on a warm, sunny morning. Later, I stayed with him in the basement, ate the cheapest food with him, and helped him pay off every debt bit by bit. He once asked me in confusion, "Why are you so good to me?" I smiled and took his hand. Maybe it's heaven's instruction. He lowered his head and whispered, "Then that must be the best gift heaven has ever given me in my life." The day the mission was completed, it was as if he knew I would leave. He hugged me tightly from behind, red-eyed, not sleeping the entire night. I softened and held him. "Joel, I won't go home." From that moment, the system vanished completely. For 5 whole years, it never appeared again. And during these 5 years, Joel cheated. In the 3rd year of our marriage, he kept a young, pretty, wild model, Laura. Chapter 2. I still remember the day I discovered he was cheating. He came home drunk, leaned against me in my arms, and suddenly mumbled, "Jessica, why did you get shorter?" At that moment, I even found him a bit funny. I had always been 1.65 m. Who suddenly becomes shorter out of nowhere? Later, when I checked his phone, I learned that the Laura he was keeping was 1.74 m, tall, slender, sexy, completely different from me. I can no longer remember many details from that day. I only remember my mind exploding in an instant, the world collapsing into darkness. Joel knelt in front of me, crying his heart out, saying he was only momentarily excited and had made a mistake. 3 years of dating, 3 years of marriage, abandoning the chance to go home, and this was the ending I received. I was unwilling to accept it, unwilling to let either of us go so easily, so we silently chose to maintain the marriage. But rotten love, a rose filled with worm eggs, you can't bear to throw it away, yet it disgusts you. In his repeated betrayals, we argued again and again, resented each other, until we were exhausted and numb, like slicing flesh with a dull knife, slowly grinding down the last bit of love. So when the long-lost system awoke from its slumber and spoke to me, I answered it immediately. System, I regret it. I want to go home. Chapter 3. Host. I reminded you that day. No one can predict the plot after the mission, including Joel's change of heart. But considering your excellent performance in previous missions, I can grant you a special privilege and open the way home again. However, the time will be 10 days from now. Tears streamed down my face. I nodded. All right, you have 10 days left in this world. The countdown to departure officially begins. The system disappeared again. The house returned to that deathly silence. I wiped my tears and began packing my things. I no longer wanted to leave any trace of myself in this world. I packed all my clothes and threw them into the trash bin. Then I took down every wedding photo of Joel and me from the wall and took out the wedding ring he had given me. When we got married, Joel held this 70-point diamond, small, but costing everything he owned, and knelt before me, choking up. Jessica, you are the only light in my dark life. In this lifetime, I will remain loyal to you and you alone. This 70-point diamond was tiny, but it carried the most passionate love between Joel and me. I had always worn it, until the day I saw Laura holding his arm, wearing that 5-carat pink diamond, brilliant and dazzling. From that moment, this ring was left inside a drawer. I smashed the wedding photo with the diamond ring, the glass shattering instantly. At last, as I looked at this home filled with traces of the life Joel and I once shared, I suddenly felt a sense of relief. I had been unwilling to give up in this twisted marriage for 5 years, struggling for 5 years. Now that I could finally leave, it counted as a form of liberation. Chapter 4. The next morning, I went downstairs. The lights in the house were dim. Joel sat on the sofa smoking, his expression unreadable. Where are the wedding photos on the wall? He spoke faintly, stopping me. His phone kept vibrating nonstop, beeping again and again. It was messages from Laura. She was holding a bouquet of gold foil roses she had just received, smiling like a blooming flower. I was so tired last night, but after receiving the gift I feel all better. He noticed it, yet still brazenly kept the screen lit. I put them away. My emotions were calm. I walked past him and went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. He crushed out his cigarette, curled his lips into a smile, stood up, and pulled a high-end Van Cleef Arpels necklace from his pocket. He placed it around my neck from behind. Still angry? Here, a gift of apology. It suits you. He lowered his head, whispering beside my ear like a serpent flicking its tongue. Jessica, you will forever be Mrs. Koo. No one can replace your status. Not even Laura. When I'm tired of playing, we can try for a child again. How about that? I pushed him away coldly, then turned and brushed the vivid lipstick mark left on his shirt. I forced a mocking smile, and walked away. Chapter 5. Joel and I once had a child, but at that time, during my first pregnancy, I didn't even know I was pregnant. Back then, I still stubbornly believed in Joel's loyalty. I stayed outside the hotel where he and Laura were living, crying the entire night, until dawn, when I personally saw him walk out with his arm around Laura. One of his hands was still on her, but as he shoved her into the passenger seat, the two of them quickly started fooling around in the car again. At that moment, I gripped the steering wheel, screaming uncontrollably, and crashed the car in a burst of heart-tearing agony. The child was lost then. It was the 4th time I discovered Joel was still having an affair with her. Joel looked a little surprised, yet still didn't sense anything unusual. He only nodded thoughtfully and left the house again. For 2 days straight, he didn't come home. During those 2 days, I watched the endless gossip news about him and Laura. I stayed calm, never made a call, never sent a message. Instead, I took all the properties and jewelry accumulated over the years and sold them, because the system told me I could still exercise my exchange privileges. The fortune I accumulated in this world could be exchanged into the world I would return to. In the first 2 years of our marriage, Joel rapidly amassed wealth through relentless hard work. In our newlywed days, when our love was the strongest, all the properties he bought were placed under my name. He said that since I had once pulled him from the abyss and suffered alongside him, he felt guilty. Only by giving me enough money could he feel at ease. In the end, he didn't give me enough love, but he gave me enough money. Enough that even if I returned to my original world, I could still live lavishly for a lifetime. When the countdown reached 5 days, I drove to the suburbs. There was only one property left unsold, a villa, Joel's anniversary gift to me after our marriage. During our sweetest times, we spent every vacation here, including that child, also conceived here. For us, this villa meant more than anything. I went there today to retrieve the property certificate and sell it to the agency. I entered the villa district. Since Joel's cheating, I hadn't returned for 2 whole years. Yet everything before me looked renewed. The small yard outside the villa was filled with blooming roses. Feeling puzzled, I got out of the car and took out the key to open the door. Unexpectedly, someone opened it from inside at the same time. What is it now? I just fed you and you already want more? It was Laura. Chapter 6. She was wearing a red silk nightdress, leaning lazily against the door, looking slightly surprised. But very quickly, those watery eyes scanned me up and down, filled with contempt and triumph. In that instant, I understood everything. Joel had been keeping her here. This is my house. I'll give you 5 minutes. Get dressed and get out. I pulled the door open to enter. Laura pressed against the door, her gaze meeting mine without a trace of fear. But Joel gave me this house. You know, gave? When was the ownership transferred? Would the owner not know? It's just you squatting here for a few days. A cuckoo occupying a magpie's nest. Do you really think you're the master? Laura's face turned pale and flushed in turns. I couldn't be bothered to waste words on her. I immediately called Joel. You clean up your own emotional mess. On the other end of the line, Joel let out a light scoff. Jessica, it's just a house. Letting a young girl stay a few days, what's the big deal? Don't go picking on her. If you make her cry, she's hard to coax, you know? And also, I didn't catch what he said next, because Laura suddenly grabbed my wrist, challenging me even more blatantly. Miss Jessica, I heard you dated Joel for 3 years before marrying him, and I've been with Joel Koo for 3 years too. Tell me, this year, do you think I can become Mrs. Koo? She then caressed her lower abdomen. Oh right. And I've added another little bargaining chip, this baby in my belly. On the phone, I could hear Joel shuffling cards, his voice lazy and careless. There's a set of top-grade ICJ beads up for auction. I bought it for you. Your birthday is in a few days. Consider it a gift. I'm keeping Laura just as a little bird for entertainment. Fine. If you're unhappy, I'll have her move out. He kept rambling, perfunctorily brushing me off. I let out a cold laugh, my voice trembling. Joel, did you hear that? Your little canary has a baby now. Congratulations. You're going to be a father. You finally got what you wanted. On the other end of the line, Joel suddenly went silent. Not a sound for a long time. Chapter 7. Joel found me just as I was leaving the cemetery. At this point, there were only 3 days left before I had to leave this world. Laura's words had reminded me of that child once again. These past few days, I had been visiting the child's grave, bringing her candies. I didn't go home, didn't answer Joel's calls. It was as if I had vanished from this world. So when Joel saw me, he grabbed me hard and forcibly pulled me into the car. Inside the car, he placed both hands on the steering wheel, gave me a deep look, and spoke in a low, hoarse voice. I'll handle everything regarding Laura. Joel once told me, a child should be born with the person you love most. In this life, I will only have a child with you. But now he had gotten Laura pregnant. Yet here he was, acting like he still loved me deeply. I found it laughable. I crossed my arms and looked out the window. What does that have to do with me? It's not like the child is mine. His gaze darkened instantly, but he chuckled, suddenly grabbing my wrist and forcing me to turn toward him. Jessica, do you truly feel nothing at all? His eyes grew increasingly red at the corners, staring at me intensely, as if terrified to miss any flicker of expression. And where have you been these past 2 days? Why didn't you answer my calls? But my face showed nothing. I simply glanced at him lightly. Then, in an almost whisper-soft voice, I told him, Joel, I'm going home. The air froze into absolute, deathly silence. After a long while, he let out a cold laugh, like he'd just heard the world's biggest joke. His tone arrogant. Go home? And where exactly can you go? You don't even have a family. Besides me, do you even have anyone else in this world? Chapter 8. I looked at him quietly, a touch of self-mockery in my eyes. So this was what love looked like at the end, words turned into weapons. I took a deep breath. There was no need to say another word to him. I got out of the car. Joel slammed the steering wheel hard, then sped away. Another fight ending in bitterness. In these last 3 days, he grew increasingly outrageous. Sometimes he even brought Laura home to spend the night, making all kinds of noises, and I merely closed my door quietly, not asking a single question. The last day before I left this world was my birthday. Early in the morning, Joel didn't even look at me. He drove off before dawn. For the entire day, I stayed alone, burning every photo of Joel and me. Then I waited quietly for midnight. That night, I bought myself a small cake and placed the birthday candles one by one. I turned off the lights, closed my eyes, interlaced my fingers, and made a wish to return home safely. A wish to never see Joel again. But before I could blow out the candles, I heard the front door open. Joel stepped inside, his face dark. Following behind him was a tearful Laura. Before I could react, she slapped me across the face. Mrs. Koo, I know you don't like me, but my child is innocent. What right do you have to hurt him? I touched my burning cheek and almost laughed at the absurdity. Honestly, I had no idea what she was talking about. I hadn't gone anywhere today. But of course, this slap she dared to give came from Joel's backing. Joel stood aside, cigar in hand, letting out a cold chuckle. Jessica, was that necessary? Just because you don't have a child, you'd send someone to run over hers? His words were a sharp blade, slicing open my oldest, deepest wound again. But I had no time to argue with him anymore. The system had already reminded me I had only a few minutes left before departure. I stepped forward, brushed past Joel, and slapped Laura across the face. This slap was repayment for hers, and a reward for her 3 years as the other woman. If I didn't strike now, there'd be no chance later. Laura froze for a moment, then burst into tears and threw herself dramatically into Joel's arms. He rubbed his temples, lifted the edge of the tablecloth. With a loud bang, plates and bowls shattered across the floor. The cake fell with them, just like my 5-year marriage, broken into pieces. He walked up to me, pinned me against the windowsill, and grabbed my jaw harshly. Under his sharp brow bones were eyes cold to the point of cruelty. I told you I'd handle this. Why did you still have to provoke her? Jessica, when did your methods become so cheap? So vicious? Or is this another stunt, something you did on purpose to make me send you home? Behind me, the window was wide open. From the 19th floor, the night wind surged in. At that moment, the clock struck midnight, and the system appeared right on time. The passage home has been opened. Once the host completes death in this alternate world, she may return to the original world. I let out a soft laugh and pushed Joel's hand away, my tone gentle. Yes, I'm exactly this vicious. Joel frowned. I reached out and pointed at Laura, smiling faintly at him. So, I'm stepping aside on my own. You and your Laura can be together. Then, under Joel's gaze, I leaned back and leapt, falling from the 19th floor. Chapter 9. 5 minutes later, downstairs, a crowd had gathered, police, doctors, everyone. But they didn't find the so-called injured person, nor a body. To be precise, there wasn't even a drop of blood on the ground below. Mr. Koo, are you certain Mrs. Koo jumped from the 19th floor? A police officer approached Joel cautiously and asked. Joel just stood there, head tilted upward, his eyes bloodshot, staring at the half-open window on the 19th floor. The night rain fell onto his face, drop by drop. I clearly saw her jump. How could this? He murmured to himself. What about other areas? Did you check the platform on the second floor? Is it possible she landed on someone's balcony? He suddenly grabbed onto these possibilities and turned around abruptly. The police officer sighed helplessly and tried to comfort him. Mr. Koo, we've checked everywhere already. But there's not even a trace, not even a shadow. At this point, the police didn't know how to handle the case. Joel and Laura both claimed to have personally witnessed Jessica flipping over the window and leaping from the 19th floor. But they couldn't find even a strand of her hair. It was as if she had evaporated from the world, vanished completely. Laura was frightened out of her mind by what had happened. A living person jumped right in front of her. From this height, she should have died instantly. But somehow, that person simply disappeared, wrapped in a blanket, trembling all over. She walked to Joel and clung tightly to his arm. Let's go home. What happened today was too strange. I'm scared. But before she finished speaking, Joel slapped her, harder than the slap Jessica had given her earlier, so hard her vision blurred and she nearly lost her balance. Joel's face darkened as he slowly stepped toward her, his aura dropping sharply. He grabbed her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. Who told you to slap my wife? Tears streamed down Laura's face as she bit her lip, looking aggrieved. Didn't you say you were bringing me to confront her? I said I'd back you up. But you walked in and slapped her first. I never agreed to that. His grip tightened, his hand slid from her chin downward, without her realizing it, until it reached her neck. Laura, if you hadn't kept crying and screaming about wanting justice for that child in your belly, if you hadn't caused such a scene today, Jessica wouldn't have. Laura stared at Joel, eyes completely red, her gaze splitting with fear. It was as if he wanted to strangle her. She began to struggle for breath. With her last bit of strength, she pried his fingers loose and choked out a sentence. Joel, I'm still carrying your child. The word Joel jolted him back. Jessica always used to call him that. Softly, just like this. He suddenly snapped back to his senses and released her. But the face he saw was nothing like Jessica's. It was another woman, face flushed, coughing violently. Joel froze, glancing around at the chaotic surroundings. Among all the faces in the crowd, there was only one he couldn't find. Hers. Reality slapped him again, cold and merciless. He remembered. Just 5 minutes ago, his Jessica had jumped from the 19th floor right in front of him, her life or death still unknown. Panic clawed at him. He stumbled backward, staggering toward the car, fleeing in utter disarray. Chapter 10. Inside the car, he curled up in the driver's seat, trembling as he lit a cigarette, only then managing to catch his breath. He stretched out one hand, staring at it blankly. Just moments ago, with this very hand, he had nearly strangled Laura in a moment of dazed rage. Suddenly, he remembered a rainy night many years ago, when he had also used this hand to grip a man's throat with all his strength. That man was his biological father. At 19, his father's affair was exposed by the media. The Koo Corporation fell into scandal, its stock price plummeting, and that man chose to run away with his mistress, leaving all the enormous debt to him and his mother. Overnight, the Koo family went bankrupt, and his mother committed suicide in despair. Later, one night, he cornered the man who was trying to flee, strangling him uncontrollably, eyes bloodshot. It was Jessica who threw herself onto him, grabbing his wrist. Joel, no, you can't. If you kill someone, your whole life will be ruined. Joel still remembered. The rain was heavy that night, so heavy that all he could hear was the downpour and Jessica's heart-tearing screams. In the end, he loosened his grip. Jessica, trembling, hugged him, tighter and tighter. Afterward, under Jessica's persuasion, he gave up the idea of killing someone to avenge his mother and chose to keep living. Later, life gradually improved. Eventually, he found evidence of that man's illegal activities during his business years and personally sent him to prison. Finally, he took over the Koo Corporation completely, building it up step by step, saving money bit by bit. Then he married the girl he loved most. Smoke swirled through the car, the glowing cigarette but fell, burning Joel's hand. He snapped out of his memories abruptly, but his eyes were already wet. Chapter 11. When Joel returned home, it was already late at night. He had gone to the police station and cooperated with the investigation. In the end, He came back with nothing more than a missing person report. Since Jessica's body wasn't found, the police couldn't issue a death certificate. They could only temporarily mark her as missing. Mr. Koo, once she has been missing for 2 years, you may come back to exchange this for a death certificate. Joel Koo slumped on the sofa, let out a cold laugh, and tossed the missing person notice aside. What death certificate? She must be playing some trick on me again. She just wants me to come home. He lowered his eyes. On the floor lay the cake he had knocked over with his own hands. Near the still open window, cold wind gusted in relentlessly. Everything, every detail, reminded him that what had happened earlier was real. His Jessica truly had jumped from here. A chill crept up from the soles of his feet, winding around him, stabbing straight into his heart. He couldn't stay in the living room another second. He fled back to the bedroom. In the bedroom, he lay on the bed in a daze. In his mind, the same scene replayed again and again. Jessica smiling as she leaned back and fell from the window. His head suddenly throbbed violently. It hurt so much that he had to forcefully knock on his own temples just to suppress the stabbing pain. His migraines were left over from years ago, back when he carried massive debt and worked several jobs a day, pushing his body to its limits. But every time he came home from work, there was always a face he wanted to see, and the exhaustion didn't feel so unbearable. If he really thought about it, back then they lived in the smallest, shabbiest basement unit. In winter, the wind and rain leaked in. In summer, cockroaches and rats wandered around. It couldn't even be called a real home. But his Jessica never complained, not once. That tiny basement became warm and cozy under her hands. They used to lie on the wooden bed. He rested his head on her lap as she gently massaged his temples. One day, as she massaged him like always, he suddenly noticed her hands. The originally fair, delicate hands were now covered in red blisters, some even cracked, raw and inflamed, obvious frostbite. In that moment, he felt something tear violently inside his chest, a pain so sharp it stole his breath. He still remembered how he held her hands that night, heart aching, and spoke each word like a vow carved into stone. Jessica, I'll make sure you live a good life. I swear it. Later, he truly succeeded. He built the Koo Corporation back up, thriving again. He moved Jessica step by step, from the basement to an apartment, then to a large flat, and finally to a villa. But he lost his sense of direction amid luxury and temptation. Even when Jessica discovered his cheating, the other woman, the arguments, the screaming, he still didn't feel there was a problem. He was just playing. After years of being suppressed, he wanted to indulge in everything new, everything exciting. All the men around him were like this. Wasn't it normal for men to keep a kept canary outside for entertainment? And he never heard of any wife causing this much trouble, let alone threatening divorce, let alone suicide. He couldn't understand. As long as she was willing, she would always be his Mrs. Koo, forever and ever. How had it come to today, this state of life or death unknown? Joel seemed to have forgotten. Back then, he had worked desperately, climbed out of the mud with bleeding hands, all because he wanted to spend his entire life with Jessica, loving her until their hair turned white. Chapter 12. When I woke up again, I was lying on a familiar bed. My head still ached faintly. Outside the window, drizzle continued falling. Just like the moment I leapt from the 19th floor, my heart tightened, and I quickly pushed open the window. What entered my sight, however, was an old street filled with the smell of street food, bustling with people buying snacks. I suddenly let out a long breath. Beside me, my phone chimed. Your bank card has received a deposit of 80 million yuan. A full 80 million. I tightened my grip on my phone and slowly lifted my head. So everything I experienced wasn't a dream, it was real. 8 years ago, while working outside, I accidentally fell from a great height and injured my spine, becoming paraplegic. That night, the system appeared for the first time. It told me that if I could complete a redemption mission, I would be rewarded with a healthy body. I agreed, and began my 8 years with Joel. Now, I had returned to my original world. Not only did I regain a healthy body, but I also received a vast fortune. In this world, there would be no endless arguments and tearing each other apart. No more lonely nights crying into my pillow. No more suffocating marriage that drowned me bit by bit. I exhaled deeply, my eyes growing wet. Freedom. It felt wonderful. Chapter 13. My life in the original world didn't change much. The only difference was that I now had enough money to last a lifetime, achieving complete financial freedom. Outside of my busy work, I began to enjoy traveling alone, sometimes to the misty riverside towns of the south, sometimes to the vast deserts of the north. Every landscape brought me joy. I even bought a traditional Chinese courtyard house by the lake. In front of the bedroom's floor-to-ceiling windows stretched a shimmering lake. On days without travel, I lounged in the hanging chair in my room, basking in the sun and reading books. The little cat at my feet would occasionally jump into my lap, purring softly. No one would come home with a cold face again. No one would scream at me. No one would grab my face and force me to look at the mirror, asking what kind of monster I had become. During these days, I took gentle care of myself again, and I brought back the Jessica who used to be bright and radiant. Reality was wonderful. In a world without Joel, every day was sunny. 2 years later, I had nearly forgotten those memories. Until that day, after drinking and chatting with my girlfriends, I returned home and collapsed on the bed. Half drowsy, the system contacted me again. Hearing its voice, I thought the alcohol was playing tricks on me, until that beam of white light appeared in front of me once more. Host, I'm deeply sorry to disturb you, but I truly have no other choice, because I opened a special privilege to send you home. The male lead Joel still hasn't found your body and remains unable to accept this reality. As his obsession grows, his world is on the verge of collapse. Once an alternate world collapses, I, the system, will be punished and permanently erased. Please help me. Return just once more to resolve the obsession in his heart. This time, there is no mission. You won't be required to stay. You will only have 5 hours in that world. Once the 5 hours are up, no matter the result, I will bring you home. Chapter 14. The system showed me a few clips of Joel's life from the past 2 years. During these 2 years, he went to work as usual, handling company affairs, but his temper became increasingly volatile. The employees lived in constant fear every day, terrified of making a mistake. Even the vases in his office had been replaced dozens of times. Occasionally, some business partners mentioned my death in front of him, even trying to use the opportunity to offer him women. He would always stare at them with a chilling, icy gaze, warning them word by word that I was not dead. Those people would look at each other in panic and flee in terror. Afterward, he would still ask his assistant whether I had messaged him that day. I remained silent. I did not feel touched, only utterly calm. But hearing the system almost begging, remembering how it had accompanied the lonely version of me in that other world for 8 years, guiding me through every mission, even at the end, it had forced itself awake, opening a special privilege to send me home when it heard my plea. Not a friend, but more than a friend. After much thought, I agreed. Back then, my farewell with Joel had indeed been abrupt, drowned in hatred and despair. Even my goodbye carried bitterness, ending my life in front of him in the most devastating way. No wonder he still hadn't let go. So this time, I would end it completely, erase every remaining tie, and make him give up once and for all. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in that world, in the home Joel and I once shared. It was late. The house was dark, silent, empty. 2 years had passed. I had nearly forgotten everything here, yet everything in the house vividly reminded me. I had lived here for 8 whole years. Nothing had changed. Everything remained exactly as it was before I left. Even the wedding photo whose glass I had shattered with my diamond ring had been repaired and rehung by Joel. Except my half of the image was now empty. In the bedroom, my pillow was still placed beside his, as if I had never left. Even my favorite book lay quietly where I used to keep it by the bedside. I picked it up and opened it. The yellowed pages, the slightly curled edges. Each page showed marks of being turned countless times. The system had once told me that after I disappeared, on every sleepless night, Joel relied on this book to fall asleep. Because after I left, everything related to me had vanished. My clothes, my photos, my belongings. Only this book he bought from the bookstore remained, its pages covered with my markings. The last proof that I had once existed. Just as I found myself lost in thought, suddenly, the front door opened. Joel had returned. After 2 years, his defined features had grown sharper, the darkness between his brows blending seamlessly with the somber winter outside the window. He changed his shoes and walked inside without turning on the lights, not noticing that I was in the bedroom. In the dim living room, he sat on the sofa and habitually lit a cigarette. The faint orange glow flickered in his fingers. When the cigarette burned out, he picked up his phone, frowning as he checked his messages for the day. In the past, when he was out messing around, he always complained that my messages were annoying, often reading them without replying. Later, I stopped messaging, stopped expecting him to come home. He pressed a hand against his forehead. Heh, 2 years. Jessica, you're really ruthless. No messages at all. This act of yours, how long do you plan to keep it going? He impatiently locked his phone, exhaled deeply, and turned to stare out the window. In his dim eyes was nothing but emptiness. Suddenly, his phone rang, cutting through the silence of the night. He looked at the caller ID, hesitated for a moment, and still picked up. Mr. Koo. It has been 2 years since Mrs. Koo went missing. This is another reminder that you may come to the station to apply for a death certificate. Joel's expression tightened, the darkness in his eyes swelling into a silent storm. The air around him turned ice cold in an instant. My wife is not dead. You didn't find her body, not a single trace, and you expect me to believe she's dead? Heh, such a trick. I'll never fall for it. His grip on his phone tightened, veins bulging. If anyone dares call again telling me to file her death certificate, I'll file his death certificate first. He slammed down the call and hurled the phone to the floor. His fist crashed onto the coffee table, shattering the glass. Head bowed. His voice came out hoarse. Jessica, how long do you want to punish me before you come back? I watched him quietly, feeling only a cold kind of irony. Come back for what? To watch him and his Laura tangle together shamelessly? To watch the shadows in my heart grow darker and darker until they devoured me whole? After a long silence, I stepped out of the bedroom. My voice was icy. Why keep lying to yourself, Joel? Chapter 15. Hearing my voice, Joel's body trembled in an instant. He slowly turned around and saw me. He froze, stared for a very long time. The light in his eyes gradually brightened. He walked toward me step by step, as if afraid of disturbing a fragile dream. Cautiously, inch by inch, he reached out until he finally pulled me into his arms. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling quietly, his voice hoarse. Jessica, you really scared me. They all said you died, but I didn't believe it. I just didn't believe it. See? I finally waited for you to come back. I pushed him away coldly. There was no emotion at all in the eyes I used to look at him with. Joel, I did die. Have you forgotten? 2 years ago, right in front of you, I jumped from the 19th floor, carrying my blessings for you and Laura. I fell while you watched. His long lashes trembled, panic flickering across his face. He seemed to finally realize that 2 years ago, I truly did die before his eyes. 1 second, I was speaking to him softly. The next, I was leaning back and plunging down 19 floors. Without hesitation, without reluctance. Just like that, I vanished from his world. Joel's face turned paper white in an instant. His hands trembled uncontrollably as he gripped my shoulders. No, impossible. Jessica, you're standing right here. You're clearly back. After you left, I made Laura get rid of the baby. I stopped contacting her. I don't see her anymore. Jessica, let's live a good life together, okay? I shook my head, looking at him calmly. I walked to the window I had once jumped from, pushed it open, and felt the same icy night wind from 2 years ago brush past my skin. Joel, do you still remember how we met? 8 years ago, the system brought me to this world. I appeared out of thin air in front of the devastated Joel. He had just lost his mother and had been beaten by debt collectors threatening him. He stood on a tall rooftop, 1 foot already stepping off the edge, and I fell from the sky, crashing into him and knocking him to the ground, propping myself up over him, looking at the boy whose eyes were filled with deathly emptiness. I smiled and said, "You must not jump. I can help you." Only then did a faint spark light up in his lifeless eyes, a sliver of hope. At that time, His heart was already dead. He didn't notice how I had appeared. Now, recalling it, shock and confusion finally spread across his face. Joel, I was never someone from your world. I came to you only to complete a mission, to save you. When the mission ended, I should have left and returned to my own world. But that year, I didn't. I stayed because I loved you, and I married you. Chapter 16. I glanced lightly at the night outside the window. Stars flickering, just as crystal clear as the night we got married. Joel Koo held me in his arms that night and promised me, Jessica, my life was saved by you. My fate was rewritten because of you. If one day I betray you, may I be hit by a car the moment I step outside. Jessica, I will make sure you live a good life. I believed him. I handed both my body and heart completely to this man. Later, he expanded the Koo Corporation, making it bigger and stronger, and he fulfilled his promise. He made me the dignified, glamorous Mrs. Koo. I no longer needed to endure hardship with him. All I had to do was wait quietly at home for him to return. But the conversations between us grew fewer and fewer. He began to stay out all night. And in the end, what I waited for was not happiness, but the headline news that he was keeping the wild model, Laura, as his mistress. From that moment on, a crack formed between us. Through repeated arguments and torment, that crack grew wider, until it became what it is now, a canyon stretching between him and me. I stood on one side, he stood on the other, never to meet again. Memories surged, and pain washed over Joel's face. Jessica, I'm sorry. You stayed by my side all those years. No matter what I became, you never left. I was too satisfied, too confident. That's why I grew greedy, why I wanted new excitement. At that time, I could do anything I wanted, whatever I desired, I could obtain. I suddenly felt unwilling to continue such a plain, ordinary life. I wanted to try everything I'd never had before, women included. He lowered his head, hands clenched tightly. I never thought you would leave. I thought that after 8 years together, you had become dispensable in my life. But I never expected that after you fell in front of me that night, I would never sleep a full night again. He trembled as he raised his eyes, reaching for my hand. Jessica, I was wrong. I was truly wrong. I shook him off coldly. Joel, 2 years ago, when you pinned me in front of the mirror and told me I was old, that I no longer looked anything like I used to, you didn't hesitate. You didn't feel a shred of pain. In this lifetime, I will never forget the look of pleasure and excitement on his face, as he held Laura, whispering against her ear. Nor will I forget how, in every argument, his expression twisted with contempt, coldness, and disgust, making me look like a madwoman. Those scenes were truly unforgettable. Loving someone is like tending flowers, and it was him who watered me with the poison of betrayal and infidelity, until I withered. Joel's eyes were red, almost bleeding. No, it wasn't like that. I was only blinded by anger. I didn't know. Jessica, I've only ever loved you. Joel, you keep saying you never had feelings for Laura, but is that true? You gave her money. You gave her time. You gave her favoritism. If that isn't affection, then what is it? You keep saying you love me. Then what was your love? Was it coldness? Was it shouting? Was it confrontation? If that's love, I don't want it. Not even a little. He claimed he never cared for Laura, that she was just entertainment. But he gave her money, and time, and care, and protection. He took her to Europe on shopping sprees, buying jewelry and luxury goods without blinking. When she was sick, he personally took her to the hospital. When she was afraid of thunder, he stayed by her side. And in every argument between me and her, he always made me step back and shielded his mistress. All those uncontrolled indulgences over the years. How could he have never felt anything? By now, Joel was kneeling on the floor, crying uncontrollably. I glanced at the time. There was 1 minute left before the 5 hours were up. Joel also sensed something was wrong. He understood I was leaving again. He saw me step back toward the window's edge. His trembling hand reached toward me. Jessica, don't leave me. Don't abandon me. In my ear, the system had already begun counting down. Joel, I came back for these last 5 hours because we only loved each other for 5 years. We loved each other once, but now, we don't love each other anymore. Somewhere in the dark, 5 years of his life had exchanged for my brief return of 5 hours. But that was all it could buy. There was no leftover love. Nothing left to carry us even one more step. The passage between worlds opened again. I looked at Joel for the last time. His tears dripped onto my hand, hot, burning, just like 8 years ago, when he loved me most. Joel, goodbye. Never again. Jessica, don't. And after saying those words, I disappeared completely before Joel's eyes, leaving him alone in the vast, empty house, crying until his voice broke. Chapter 17. After Jessica left, Joel collapsed on the floor where she had disappeared, staring at the ceiling, motionless. 2 years ago, Jessica had suddenly fallen from his sight and vanished. Back then, he could still deceive himself, telling himself that since her body wasn't found, she wasn't dead. But now, he knew, Jessica would never come back again. In this world, he would never be able to wait for her again. He and Jessica had walked through 8 long years together, the most precious years of his life. He had spent with her. It was her arrival that allowed him to believe in love again, and taught him, bit by bit, how to love someone. His original plan in life was to marry Jessica, then have a child, and live happily ever after. He fulfilled the first goal. He married Jessica. But ironically, fate often adds a dash. And when the love story starts a new line, it isn't always the ending one hopes for. All the beauty in their lives ended abruptly in the 3rd year of their marriage. The night that ambitious young model clung to him, he foolishly asked her name. Laura. Laura. Jessica. That night, he kept her. After that, he continued to do many things he could no longer understand himself. By the time he realized it, he and Jessica could no longer return to how they once were. He remembered that he and Jessica once had a child, but before he had the chance to feel the joy of becoming a father, that child was gone, lost because of his betrayal. Later, Laura told him he was going to be a father again. At first, he was overjoyed, even a little flustered. The joy of new life clouded his mind, enough that he actually believed Laura, believed her lie that Jessica had sent someone to kill their baby. That brief moment of stupidity was what made Jessica leap from the 19th floor before his eyes, disappearing from his life for 2 whole years. Later, he finally came to his senses and learned it was all Laura's lie, a trick to fight for favor. He panicked so much that he dragged Laura onto the operating table and personally ended their child. Also, Jessica might forgive him. Afterwards, Laura came crying to him more than once, accusing him of being cruel and heartless, saying he had taken away her chance to ever be a mother. He only gave her a cold, superior smile. From the moment you volunteered to be my mistress, you should have expected this ending. Everything he did was to atone, to let Jessica, wherever she was hiding, see that he truly regretted everything. But after waiting for 2 years, what he finally received wasn't forgiveness, but the final blow to the heart. He didn't know how much time had passed before Joel picked himself up from the floor and slowly walked to the open window. He looked down, pitch black, like an abyss, but his Jessica had jumped from here with such resolve. Without a trace of hesitation, he opened his arms and closed his eyes, feeling the cold night wind brushing past him. She said that when she jumped, she went home. Then if he jumped, would he be able to see her too? A moment later, without any hesitation, he leaped, ending his life at the age of 26. And with his death, the redemption task belonging to the male lead Joel came to a complete end. The foreign world resumed its normal operation. The system let out a long breath of relief, and amid a rumbling sound, opened a new cycle of missions.